You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Thursday, 25th of September 2014. Surrey family fight back against racism. A child is reported missing in the UK every 3 minutes. Everyone matters as much as Alice Gross. Police appeal after girl 13 grabbed by Asian male in Preston, Lancashire's Moor Park. Britain First scolding claims to have stepped on the toes of SO15 in statement on Anjem Choudary's arrest. Anis Abid Sardar, father of one, plotted to murder soldiers with IEDs. French hostage beheading. President Hollande holds crisis talks. Cyprus rescue operation launched for 300 Syrian war refugees stranded at sea. At least 14 militants dead in US-led strikes in Syria. Thought for the day, another day on the res. And finally, Tuferwunday Thursday. UK news. Surrey family fight back against racist migrant family. A family in Surrey have fought back successfully against an immigrant family of Algerians who moved next door to them last year. On hearing their terrible dilemma on emailing the South East Regional BNP office, advice was given to them which they took up and implemented with great success so far. The trouble started when abuse and harassment was meted out to the children of the Surrey family when they used their own garden and walked to and from their own house. Verbal abuse and threats were used against the parents without cause, and they were advised by the local police not to use their own garden this summer. On advice from the South East office, they were asked to install a CCTV camera, keep a written record and use their garden all the time. This has worked, and the Algerian, who has threatened to drive them out so that he could buy their house, has been obvious in his absence. So the World at 8 message is: do not put up and shut up. Fight back legally and with the help of friends and neighbours. Do not get physical or even take any notice of abuse. Write it down and pursue legal means of getting rid. Congratulations to the South East for their help to these people. A child is reported missing in the UK every 3 minutes. Everyone matters as much as Alice Gross. This is an opinion voiced by Abby Wilkinson in the Mirror on the 24th of September, and it is one with which I wholeheartedly agree. Abby says, it's time we started paying attention to the welfare of all children unaccounted for and at risk in our country, not just the handful of cases that happen to capture the public imagination. On the 28th of August, a young girl went missing. Her name is Alice Gross. She is 14 years old and her disappearance has galvanised press, public and police alike in a massive countrywide campaign for her safe return. This is exactly how you'd hope things would be. It's sometimes claimed that you can never fully understand the horror of a missing child unless you are a parent yourself, but a look at Facebook and Twitter shows a deep empathy for both Alice and herself and her family and friends stretched across all sections of society. But Alice is not the only minor to have vanished in the UK in recent weeks. Angeline Van Boy, Chelsea Abraham, Shane Crought, Demi Collins, Monica Kanieva and Man Hong. Unlike Alice Gross, these are names it is unlikely you will be familiar with, but all of these children have been reported missing in the period of time since Alice Gross first disappeared. Thank you, Abby. Why is it we the public do not hear more about the rest of these children? The full text of Abby's opinion can be found on the Mirror's website. World at 8. I heard a disturbing video yesterday in which an American quite rightly stated that the British would rather have their young girls raped and murdered than be declared racist, as they are now so progressive. True and very sad. Police appeal after girl 13 grabbed by Asian male in Preston, Lancashire's Moor Park. Police are appealing for information after a 13-year-old schoolgirl was grabbed by a man in Preston Moors Park on Tuesday, September 16th. The incident took place at around 8:25 p.m. after the girl had become separated from her friends near the duck pond. She was approached by a man who took hold of her arm before she managed to break free and run off. DC Justin Singleton from Preston's CID said the girl was upset and frightened but fortunately suffered no serious physical injury. We believe this was an isolated incident and would urge anyone who may have seen this man in the area or witnessed the incident to come forward. The male is described as a large built Asian male, early 30s, wearing a black jacket with a hood and a thick light blue stripe on the arms. Anyone with information can call police on 101. World at 8. The plods have to believe it is an isolated incident, or else they'd have to do some work and dig up real nasties that would earn them the name of racists. Britain First's Golding claims to have stepped on the toes of SO15 in statement on Anjem Choudary's arrest. Anjem Choudary, the radical preacher, is one of 9 men arrested early Thursday by Scotland Yard officers as part of an investigation into Islamist terrorism. The men were arrested on suspicion of being members of or supporting a banned organisation, a Metropolitan Police spokesman said. Al-Maharajun is understood to be the banned organisation in question, according to sources. Mr Choudary, a lawyer, has established a reputation for being careful to stay on the right side of the law when he makes controversial comments about race relations and religion. The exact nature of the inquiry was not disclosed by Scotland Yard. World at 8. Paul Golding of Britain First was quick to claim a significant development in a campaign that has seen him speaking several times to the police about their actions. He is lucky not to be charged with obstruction or interfering with an investigation, as he readily admits to have stepped on the toes of SO15 and hopes Britain's First actions have saved some lives down the road. I just hope he has not screwed up the investigation so that the bastards get to walk. What is they say about the road to hell paved with good intentions? Abid Sardar, father of 1, plotted to murder soldiers with IEDs. Wembley, northwest London. The father of 1 accused of plotting to murder British and American soldiers with roadside bombs in Iraq was remanded in custody Thursday. Abid Sardar, 37, was arrested at his Wembley home by anti-terror police on Tuesday, 23rd of September, on suspicion of making improvised explosive devices in the war-torn country in 2007. Sardar was charged with conspiracy to murder and conspiring to cause an explosion with intent to endanger life or property. The charges relate to a number of unexploded bombs found in Iraq's An al-Bahr province, a region of fierce resistance by insurgent forces against coalition troops. World at 8. The sickening side of this is that I bet he was taken from a nice warm house with a nice well-fed large family and all on the British taxpayers. Deportation for the entire bunch should be mandatory for Muslims who even breathe terrorist air. Treason. European news. French hostage beheading, President Hollande holds crisis talks. France's Defence Council is to hold a crisis meeting after the beheading of tourist Hervé Gourdel by Algerian militants linked to Islamic State. The meeting was called by President François Hollande, who condemned the killing as cruel and cowardly. Jund al-Khalifa group killed Mr Gourdel after giving France an ultimatum to halt its air attacks on IS in Iraq. Defence Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said on Thursday France would consider targeting IS in Syria as well as Iraq. Islamic State has seized large areas of Syria and Iraq in recent months. Ahead of Thursday's crisis meeting, French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said everything will be looked after again, including what we want to do in Iraq and what will happen in Syria. French warplanes have been taking part in US-led airstrikes against IS in Iraq since last Friday and on Thursday carried out new raids. However, it has so far refrained from joining the US and several Arab states in attacking targets in Syria. Mr Le Drian told French radio that it was a question that is on the table, but he added, "The opportunity is not there today. We already have an important task in Iraq." On Wednesday, President Hollande said despite the killing of Mr Gourdel, 55, French strikes in Iraq would continue. World at 8. Always hurts when evil comes home to roost, doesn't it? Cyprus. Rescue operation launched for 300 Syrian war refugees stranded at sea. Cyprus has started a rescue operation after a small fishing boat carrying more than 300 migrants, thought to be Syrian refugees, was spotted off the island's west coast. A Cypriot Defence Ministry spokeswoman, Alina Fizentou, said the boat, loaded mostly with hundreds of women and children, was seen 55 nautical miles, 100 kilometres, south of the resort town of Paphos. She added that the boat, which sent an SOS signal as it was caught in rough seas, is believed to have embarked from Syria. Helicopters are at the scene and a search and rescue operation was underway with coastguards, a cruise boat and a tanker on site, according to Fazento. Thousands of migrants fleeing conflicts in the Middle East have set sail to the Mediterranean in unsafe boats looking for refuge in Europe. In the latest tragedy, 500 migrants were deliberately drowned by smugglers off the coast of Malta. World at 8. Many of those fleeing are terrorist families who know they're on the losing side. Leave them to turn the boat round to North Africa. What happened to the next Islamic country over the border business? No money in it, that's what. World News. Cameron recalls British Parliament to sanction airstrikes against Islamic State. Prime Minister David Cameron said he wanted Britain to join US-led airstrikes against the Islamic State militant group after the Iraqi government requested London's help, and he recalled Parliament to secure its approval for military action. Parliament, which was in recess, will reconvene on Friday to vote on allowing Britain's Royal Air Force to hit Islamic State targets in northern Iraq. The action has brought the backing of all three main parties and is expected to comfortably pass. Cameron spoke after US planes pounded Islamic State positions in Syria for a second day. But the strikes did not halt the fighters' advance in a Kurdish area where fleeing refugees told of villages burnt and captives beheaded. "We must not be so frozen with fear that we don't do anything at all," Cameron told the 193-member United Nations General Assembly on Wednesday. "We have a need to act in our own national interest to protect our people and our society, so it's right that Britain should now move to a new phase of action." He described Islamic State as having a sick extremist world view. World at 8. What a U-turn from the brave jihadis trying to overthrow the Assad government. At least 14 militants dead in US-led strikes in Syria. At least 14 Islamic State fighters were killed in airstrikes by US-led forces overnight in northeast Syria, a group monitoring the war said on Thursday. The strikes also killed at least 5 civilians, said Ramu Abdul Rahman, who runs the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. A third night of US-led airstrikes late on Wednesday targeted Islamic State-controlled oil refineries in eastern Syria as the United States and its allies tried to stem a major source of revenue for the al-Qaeda offshoot, US officials said. The strikes hit facilities around al-Mayadin, al-Hasakah and Abu Kamal, the US military reported. The initial days of US strikes suggest another aim is to hamper Islamic State's ability to operate across the Syria-Iraq frontier. World at 8. Let's hope they were all the British-born ones. Yippee! Thought for the day. Another day on the res. Well, we are reading again from the tribal deerskin of the Nashonas out of the clan of the Fakawi nations. We have read from the time of the encroachment of the Wendigo and the sheer evil of its applications. We have told of the fate of Kevan of the Lakes and his fellow warrior runs on shore, whose scalps are now hanging off the flap of dawn of the dead's tepi. We have also told of the old chief Le Griff and his fate of being left in the wilderness and cold to die, also the fate of his family being banned from the Nashona's tribal council and being cast out with their father. We have told of the night of the long spears and the coming of the Wendigo, who were ruthless in their taking over of the tribal council tepi and many of its occupants. There followed many moons of torture and banishment, all against former tribal members who had supported Le Griff and supported the tribal council for many moons and in many wars, even before the reservation. And it came to pass from within those warriors a new method of communicating with their fellows, unseen by those who would destroy them and the tribe. It was called the WWW, which stands for Wins Against the Wicked Wendigo, and could be brought about by starting a small fire and flapping a rug over it, making words out of the smoke. If one got onto a high enough hill, the Wendigo and its followers on the lower grasses of the res couldn't see what a warrior wanted to tell another one, either at the other side of the res or off the res entirely. It was a wondrous thing to behold, and of course, unlike the inscribed words on tablets of clay or mud, once told in the wind of the great god Gitchi Manitou, it was blown away on his breath, unlike the tablets which stayed on to testify against a warrior who might fight the Wendigo and lead to his ultimate fate. And it came to pass that the very air and wind above the res became thick with smoke and the thoughts of the oppressed tribe people and their warriors. There were great cries going out on the strong waves of wind that passed overhead and onto the great plains. The unhappy warriors found a name under which each of their fires could operate at once and in unison, and it was called He Who Runs with Faces, and it was mightily popular with the unhappy Nashona people who had nowhere else to turn. Of course it was infiltrated from time to time with Wendigo followers, but then they were handled in the great Nashona tradition, that of taking out of the tongues and the cutting off of hands, so they couldn't intrude on the proper right of winds against the wicked Wendigo any more, and thus it came to pass. The great Gitche Manitou in all his goodness smiled on the WWW and the unhappy tribes people of the Nashonas and blew the winds of certain fires over the tipis of the Wendigos, who I shall name yet again for the writers on the deerskins. They were dancing with sticks, or Ganga Mio Prick, dancing with strings, Dawn of the Dead, fiddling with IT, and Look at Me I'm Important Shaoli. On the sidelines and non-tribal members were taking from the Eurogitchi and He Who Plays with Numbers, one of whom was a close friend of Lagriffe during his sojourn with the Eurogitchis. So as it came to pass that the winds blew certain fires across the tipis of the Wendigo, but they ignored the contents and were loud in their contempt for the senders on the wind. All the pleas for help and consideration of certain tribal council members passed by the Wendigo, who didn't stir from their large tipi of the ex-chief Lagriffe, and ignored the cries for help from all who sent them. The Wendigo was truly in power now, and Dancing with Sticks was well and truly beating the drum of Dancing with Strings, who, although rarely being seen in person, was always having smoke signals sent around the res stating how wonderful and true a leader he was. These puffs were dismissed by true members of the Nashonas as being just plain wind issuing from the fundament of the Wendigo at regular intervals, frantically puffed up by Look at Me I'm Important Shaoli, a great master of the useless puff of wind. So we have the great and true nation of Nashonas split and divided, tortured and banished, ignored and cheated even in death. Yes, even in death, the gold of various tribal members is forfeit to the Wendigo, namely the prime actor on the Wendigo stage, Dancing with Sticks, whose concubine, Dawn of the Dead, keeps prospective gold givers captive until they do the dance of death and the gold is offered up to the Wendigo Council. The weeping and wailing of the smoke signals has been ignored by the Wendigo, so what can the tribal council and warriors of the Nashonas do against such an evil diktat? How can they reform or replace the sheer evil of the Wendigo and its members? The only option left open to the Nashonas was still to do the wind and smoke of the WWW and back it up with inscriptions on deer hides displayed to the entire tribe of the Nashonas, of the clan of the Fakawi and the nation of Lagriffe. In that way all will know of the displeasure of the vast majority of Nashonas left in place in the tribal council, and those warriors who have not been caught, tortured or banished from the lands of the res for no good reason. How can the Nashona nation survive such a calumny? In an act of sheer cowardice and realising that Dancing with Strings had been forced by Dancing with Sticks to banish 3 important members of one of the smaller tribal councils as his first move towards bringing the Nashonas into a modern age, alias removing certain warriors from the tribal council ranks to be banished into the lands beyond the res as punishment. Due to the smoke signals and messages flying into their Wendigo tipi which had stifled their breath, they reinstated the Nawistas as they were called back in their place, but issued with that placement of a new smoke signal which lied in the face of Gitche Manitou and made him very angry. It was this anger that sealed the fate of the Wendigo in the months to come, and the writings on the deerskins being displayed and the wafting of the plumes of smoke being made waxed great upon the res, and the minds of the remaining Nashonas were open to the great deceit that had been practised upon them, and they became angry. But it was well known at that time that even if a wrong or untrue word went out on the smoke that wafted on the wind over the tribal lands, that however wicked those words were, they had been seen by the Nashonas in their entirety and noted, and once smoke gets in your eyes, it is there for eternity, and once the words are written on the wind, the deed has been done and the weapon of the forked tongue has worked. So the Wendigo had brought yet another weapon to the Nashona nations and used the weapon of the true warriors against them, and for the Wendigo, but all was not lost as the users of those weapons grew quiet and silent and became even more wicked in their silence. The Wendigo installed a new young warrior in their clan named Dav of the Wrongdoings, and Dav was operated by Dawn of the Dead, whom he admired mightily. He had control of the lower tribal council in the old chief's tipi and slid around like a snake, spreading ill wind and lies amongst the southernmost portion of the Nashona res, as these were the warriors who had stood up for Lagrif, and his smoke signals caused much unrest and heartache. However, the sub-chief of the South-Ease, as they were called, brought to bear a smoke signal which disseminated Dav and his machinations, and Dawn of the Dead was mightily displeased. The Nashonas have written on the deerskin that they all continued with their fight against the Wendigo, and we will read what happens in the next instalment of the Nashonas' fight against evil in its purest form. Now please note the Nashonas is a patented tribe from the World at 8. If you hear any other Nashonas, it ain't the right ones. And finally, Tuferwunday Thursday. Arguing with a woman is like getting arrested. Everything you say can and will be used against you. I like that one. And now, have you heard the latest news? Jihadi John has said to his next hostage, "We, the Islamic State, now demand that you, the infidel, throw dice to determine your fate. If you throw a 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, we will peacefully offer up your head to Allah, the compassionate, the merciful." "What if I throw a 6, the hostage asks. Jihadi John replies, "You get to throw again." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend.